You are tired. Not the kind of tired that a long night of sleep can fix, nor the physical exhaustion that comes after a day of hard labor. This is a heaviness that sits deep within the marrow of your bones, a persistent gravitational pull on your spirit. You have spent your entire life being the strong one. You are the rock upon which your friends, your family, and perhaps even your parents have built their lives. You are the listener, the mediator, the fixer. When chaos erupts, you are the calm eye of the storm. People praise you for this. They tell you how mature you are, how reliable, how incredibly resilient you have become. And yet, when the doors are closed and you are finally alone in the silence of your own room, you do not feel strong. You feel hollow. You feel a terrifying, creeping numbness that suggests you are merely an actor playing a role you never auditioned for. You look at the problems of others and you solve them with surgical precision. But when you look inward, you see only a fog. You might worry that this coldness means you are broken, or worse, that you are secretly heartless, a sociopath hiding behind a smile. Let me stop you right there. You are not broken. You are not a monster. What you are experiencing is not a defect of character. It is a sophisticated biological survival strategy. You are suffering from the weight of a burden you picked up before your shoulders were broad enough to carry it. This is the good child syndrome. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, spent his life mapping the hidden territories of the human psyche. He understood that the human mind is not designed to be a static machine, but a living, adapting organism. When a tree is planted in the shade, it twists itself into strange shapes, not because it is wrong, but because it is desperate to reach the sunlight. You, too, twisted yourself. You grew up too soon. You bypassed the chaotic, messy freedom of childhood and stepped straight into the rigid armor of adulthood. This numbness you feel? It is not an absence of feeling, it is an emotional firewall. It is a barricade your brain constructed years ago to keep you safe from being overwhelmed by the instability of your environment. But here is the secret that few people understand, and the reason you are listening to this right now. This curse of yours is actually a dormant superpower. By learning to detach, by learning to observe without reacting, you have inadvertently developed the capacity for profound wisdom. You have the potential to become what Jung called the detached observer, one who can navigate the storms of life without drowning. But to unlock this power, to turn this lead into gold, you must first understand the trap you are currently standing in. You must understand the price you paid for your goodness. To understand why you feel this way, we must look at the architecture of your past through the lens of both Jungian analysis and modern neuroscience. In a healthy development cycle, a child is a creature of pure impulse. A child screams when hungry, cries when sad, and laughs when happy. They are entirely dependent on their caregivers to regulate their nervous system. The parent acts as an external prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, regulation, and planning, because the child's brain has not yet developed these circuits. The parent absorbs the child's chaos and returns calm. This is a biological necessity. Mirror neurons in the child's brain look to the parent to learn how to exist. But perhaps your story was different. Perhaps, in your earliest years, the environment was not a place of safety, but a place of unpredictability. Maybe your parents were physically present, but emotionally absent, wrapped up in their own grief, addiction, or narcissism. Maybe they were volatile, prone to sudden explosions of rage or collapsing into puddles of despair. In that environment, your developing brain made a terrifying calculation. It realized that there was no adult in the room, and nature abhors a vacuum. If the parent cannot be the regulator, the child must step up. You learned very quickly that your needs, your tears, your anger, your chaotic impulses were a threat to the fragile stability of the household. If you cried, your parent crumbled. If you demanded attention, they lashed out. So you engaged in what we can call the Great Suppression. You learned to scan the room the moment you walked in, reading the micro-expressions on your parents' face to gauge the weather of the house. You learned to suppress your own cortisol spikes, swallowing your anxiety so that you wouldn't trigger theirs. You became the emotional shock absorber. Jung would argue that you sacrificed your divine child, that spark of spontaneity, creativity, and messy vitality, on the altar of survival. You traded your authenticity for attachment. You realized that to be loved, or at least to be safe, you had to be good. You had to be the compliant diplomat. This was not a conscious choice. It was a biological imperative. Your brain rewired itself to prioritize the needs of others over your own internal signals. You became an expert at empathy, but it was a hypervigilant, weaponized form of empathy. You don't just feel for people. You anticipate their needs before they even know them, because once, long ago, your safety depended on it. This brings us to the core of the syndrome, the compassion bankruptcy. You have spent decades pouring from a cup that has a hole in the bottom. You give, and you give, and you listen, and you fix. You are the therapist to your friends, the mediator to your family, and you do it well. But deep down, there is a growing resentment. A dark, quiet voice that whispers, "When is it my turn? Who is going to take care of me?" And because you are the good child, you immediately shove that voice down. You feel guilty for even thinking it. You tell yourself you are selfish. And so, the cycle repeats. You work harder, you become more perfect, you achieve more, thinking that if you can just be good enough, the feeling of safety and validation will finally arrive. But it never does, because you are trying to fill a spiritual void with performance. Jung warned of the dangers of identifying too closely with the persona, the mask we wear for society. For the good child, the persona is the responsible adult. It is the mask of the one who has it all together, but the more you polish this mask, the darker your shadow becomes. The shadow contains everything you repressed: your anger, your selfishness, your laziness, your desire to be messy and irresponsible. As you moved into adulthood, this dynamic didn't disappear, it metastasized. You likely find yourself in relationships where you are again the caretaker. You attract partners who need saving or fixing, recreating the dynamic you had with your parents. You take on extra work at the office because you can't say no. You feel a compulsive need to smooth over any conflict, often at the expense of your own dignity. Modern neuroscience tells us that this state of constant high alert creates a baseline of chronic stress. Your amygdala is always scanning for threats, disapproval, conflict, rejection. You are living in a state of functional freeze. You are moving, working, and talking, but your emotional core is frozen to protect you from the pain of realization. The realization that you were robbed of your childhood. This brings us to a critical juncture, a dangerous one, because eventually the energy required to maintain this emotional firewall runs out. This is usually when the good child hits a wall. It might manifest as a sudden, inexplicable depression. It might look like burnout, or, more alarmingly, it might manifest as a sudden explosion of uncharacteristic rage or a total detachment from reality. Jung called this the Enantiodromia, when a force flips into its opposite. The perfect, compliant child suddenly wants to burn the house down, or they simply turn to stone. If you are feeling this coldness, this urge to just stop caring, do not be afraid. This is not the end. This is the signal. It is your psyche screaming at you that the old contract, the deal you made as a child to trade your soul for safety, is null and void. The survival mechanism that saved you at 5 years old is killing you at 25, or 40, or 50. But how do you dismantle a system that is hardwired into your very biology? How do you thaw a heart that had to freeze to survive? The answer lies not in trying to fix yourself. You have done enough fixing for one lifetime. The answer lies in something far more radical. To see this path clearly, let us step away from the abstract and look at a specific life. Let us look at the case of a man we will call Heinrich. Heinrich came to therapy not because he was failing, but because he was succeeding too well, and he felt absolutely nothing about it. Heinrich was the eldest son of a volatile, alcoholic father and a timid, anxious mother. From the age of 6, Heinrich became the de facto head of the household. He learned that if he kept his grades perfect, if he kept his room spotless, and if he anticipated his father's moods before they escalated, he could maintain a fragile peace in the home. He became a master of de-escalation. He learned to make himself small so his father would feel big, and he learned to be strong so his mother would feel safe. Fast forward 30 years. Heinrich is a high-ranking corporate consultant. He is paid an exorbitant amount of money to walk into failing companies, absorb their chaos, and restructure them. He is calm. He is efficient. He is the person everyone relies on. But one Tuesday morning, Heinrich sat in his car in the parking lot of his office, and he simply could not open the door. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't sad. He was just empty. He looked at his hands on the steering wheel and felt like they belonged to a stranger. He described it as running on fumes, but the engine won't stop. Heinrich had reached the limit of his emotional firewall. His brain, having spent 3 decades in a state of hyper-arousal, flooding his system with cortisol to prepare for a disaster that never came, finally pulled the emergency brake. His numbness was not a malfunction. It was a biological quarantine. His psyche was saying, "No more. I will not let you care anymore, because caring costs too much." Perhaps you are like Heinrich. You might not be a corporate consultant, and your trauma might not look exactly like his. But you know that feeling in the parking lot. You know the sensation of staring at a text message from a friend in crisis and feeling a sudden sharp wave of irritation followed by guilt. You know the exhaustion of being the strong one when you secretly want to collapse. If you recognize this coldness in yourself, this feeling of being behind a glass wall while life happens on the other side, I want you to pause for a moment. Do not scroll past this. Take a breath. If you are brave enough to admit that you are tired of carrying the world, comment, "I am listening," below. Acknowledging this reality is the first crack in the mask. It is the first step in telling your shadow that it is safe to speak. Now that we have seen the face of this syndrome, we must dissect it. The good child syndrome is not a monolith. It progresses through specific stages. Jung believed that neurosis is often just suffering that has not yet found its meaning. To find the meaning, we must identify where you are on this map. There are 3 distinct signs that you are trapped in the cycle of the pathological giver. The first sign is what I call the anticipation engine. This is the early stage, and it is often mistaken for high emotional intelligence. You walk into a room and you immediately scan the emotional temperature. You notice the slight frown on your boss's face. You hear the change in pitch in your partner's voice. Your mirror neurons are firing rapidly, not to connect, but to predict. In this stage, you believe you are being helpful. You fix problems before they even happen. You smooth over awkward silences. You apologize for things you didn't do just to restore harmony. But neurologically, your brain is treating social interaction as a threat assessment. You are not present. You are calculating. You are trying to control the external world so that you don't have to feel the internal anxiety of uncertainty. You are a soldier who thinks the war is still on. The second sign is the identity merger. This is where the danger deepens. Because you have spent so long tuning into the frequency of others, you have lost your own signal. You have become a chameleon. If you are with a loud person, you become quiet. If you are with a sad person, you become the cheerleader. You have become so fluid that you no longer know what shape you actually are. Jung warned that when we neglect our own individuality to please the collective, we become unconscious. You might find that you don't know what you want for dinner, let alone what you want for your life. You wait for someone else to choose, and then you agree. This isn't politeness, it is a loss of self. You are suffering from agency atrophy. You have unused decision-making muscles that have withered away because your survival depended on compliance, not choice. And finally, we reach the third and most critical stage, the dissociative fog. This is where Heinrich was. This is where the numbness sets in. When the brain realizes that the strategy of pleasing everyone is impossible to sustain, it initiates a strategic withdrawal. You might start to feel a cynical distance from people. You might look at your friends crying over a breakup and think, "Why are you being so dramatic?" You might feel a dark satisfaction in cutting people off. This is your shadow rising up. The shadow is the part of you that was never allowed to be selfish, never allowed to be cold, and now it is taking over. This stage is dangerous because it can lead to total isolation. But, and this is the most important thing I will tell you, this stage is also the most transformative. This fog is not the end of the road, it is the cocoon. You see, the good child must die so that the real adult can be born. The numbness you feel is actually the death of the persona. The mask is falling off, and the raw, unformed skin underneath is exposed to the air for the first time. It hurts. It feels cold, but it is real. Jung believed that the goal of life is individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from your parents, separate from society's expectations, and separate from your own defense mechanisms. The numbness is your opportunity to pivot. It is the silence before the song begins. But how do you move from this frozen state to a state of true, regulated power? How do you thaw the ice without drowning in the flood of emotions that you have repressed for 20 years? You must learn a new way of interacting with the world. You must learn the art of benevolent detachment. This is the pivot point. This is where you stop being a victim of your own empathy and start becoming the master of it. Benevolent detachment is not about becoming cold. It is not about abandoning the people you love. It is about recognizing a fundamental law of physics in the realm of the psyche. You cannot save a drowning man if you are hugging him. To save him, you must have your feet on solid ground, and you must extend a hand, not your whole soul. Jung called the process of finding this solid ground individuation. It is the act of separating your own emotional reality from the emotional reality of those around you. It is realizing that their storm does not have to be your rain. To achieve this, we must install a new piece of mental software. Let's call it the psychic air gap. In computer security, an air gap is a security measure where a secure computer is physically isolated from unsecured networks. It has no connection to the internet, so it cannot be hacked. You need to create a temporary air gap between your empathy and your reaction. Here is how it works in practice. The next time a crisis arises, your parent calls in a panic, your partner starts an argument, your boss demands the impossible, your old good child circuit will scream, "Fix it, soothe them, apologize." Instead, you are going to do something radical. You are going to do nothing, just for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, you are going to engage your prefrontal cortex. You are going to ask yourself a single diagnostic question. Is this my problem to solve, or is this their experience to navigate? This sounds simple, but for you it will feel like breaking a bone. Your amygdala will panic. It will tell you that if you don't react, you are unsafe. It will tell you that you are being bad. This brings us to the final trap you must navigate, the guilt spike. As you begin to set these boundaries, as you stop anticipating everyone's needs and start protecting your own energy, people will react. And they probably won't like it. They are used to the good child. They are used to the compliant version of you. When you change the script, they will feel the loss of your service. They might call you selfish. They might say you've changed. And you will feel a wave of guilt so heavy it might knock the wind out of you. But here is what you must understand. That guilt is not a moral compass. It is a withdrawal symptom. It is your brain reacting to the breaking of the old survival contract. You must treat this guilt like a passing fever. Acknowledge it, feel it, but do not obey it. Jung said, "I would rather be whole than good." To be good in the way you were taught is to be sliced into pieces for everyone else to consume. To be whole is to keep your pieces together. When you start practicing benevolent detachment, a miracle begins to happen. You stop absorbing the poison of the world, and because of that, you become a much more effective healer. You can listen to a friend's pain without taking it home with you. You can offer advice from a place of clarity, not desperation. You become a lighthouse. You shine a light on the rocks, but you do not run down into the water to drown with the ship. This is the alchemy of your suffering. The good child syndrome was a heavy coat you wore through a long, hard winter. It kept you warm. It kept you safe. But the winter is over. The coat is now too heavy. It is restricting your movement. It is suffocating your heart. You have paid your dues. You have raised your parents. You have fixed the broken things. You have survived the lack of safety by becoming your own shelter. But now it is time to lay down the tools of survival and pick up the tools of living. You are not just a survivor of a difficult past. You are an architect of a new consciousness. The sensitivity that made you vulnerable is the same sensitivity that, when mastered, makes you wise. The world does not need more good children who are burnt out, resentful, and hiding behind a mask of perfection. The world needs conscious adults who know who they are, who can stand in the fire without burning, and who can offer love without losing themselves. This is your task now, not to be good, but to be real. To let the numb parts thaw, to let the angry parts speak, and to integrate them into a being who is no longer afraid of the dark. Take off the armor. You don't need it anymore. You are safe now, not because the world is perfect, but because you are finally on your own side. Thank you for walking this path with me. See you in the next dimension.